So Vladimir Putin is claiming that he has won the Battle of Mariupol, even though Ukrainian soldiers are still resisting there. Well, if you believe that, I've got a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you. Let's talk about it in today's video.
Предлагаемый штурм промышленной зоны считаю нецелесообразным. Приказываю отменить. Это тот случай, когда мы должны думать, то есть мы всегда должны думать, но в данном случае тем более, о сохранении жизни и здоровья наших солдат и офицеров. Не нужно лезть в эти катакомбы и ползать там под землей по этим промышленным объектам. Заблокируйте эту промышленную зону так, чтобы...
Hi, I'm Mike Reiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. I'm also a lawyer and an academic, and I'm here to help you stand up to the BS of the MAGA crowd. So that's right, Vladimir Putin is claiming success in Mariupol. Mariupol, as you know, is the port city in the south of Ukraine that has been under siege now by the Russians for nearly a month. The other day, the Russians issued an ultimatum requiring them to surrender or be destroyed, which the Ukrainians ignored. Putin then said, no, that one we didn't mean. Now we really have an ultimatum that you better surrender or be destroyed, which of course the Ukrainians promptly ignored again. So today, Vladimir Putin announced that they're going to stop trying to take the final parts of Mariupol that are still resisting. You see, the Russians have essentially leveled most of the city, with the exception of a large Soviet-era steel plant. This plant includes all kinds of tunnels, different buildings, places to hide. It has been a nightmare for the Russians to try to occupy. To assist them in this effort, actually, Russians have brought fighters in from Chechnya and Syria to help them, apparently believing that these fighters would have much less sympathy for the Ukrainians than the actual Russian soldiers would, which is really saying something after what we've seen in Bucha. But the Ukrainians, in probably one of the most impressive displays of resistance in history, have managed to hold off this non-stop assault, despite the fact that they're running out of food and weapons. Word is there might be as many as 30,000 Ukrainian soldiers holed up in this location, in addition to potentially as many as 100,000 civilians. So to be sure, this final push into Mariupol would have been bloody and difficult for the Russians to accomplish, if they could accomplish it at all. Yesterday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, arguing that the civilians still remaining in Mariupol are basically starving, made an offer to negotiate with the Russians, basically offering them whatever they wanted, including the return of Russian prisoners of war in exchange for allowing the civilians to leave Mariupol. Putin, of course, showed no interest in that. But now he's taken the position that the blockade of that city, or what remains of it, will essentially continue. Now, you might think, oh, that's not a big deal. I mean, as Putin said, they're going to seal off that area so not even a fly could get in or out of it. But here's the problem. You see, the Russians right now are embarking on a new offensive. After their invasion of Kyiv failed miserably, they've decided to focus their forces on the eastern and southeastern part of the country. This is a part of the country where they essentially already have a foothold. I mean, the very far eastern part of the country is what's called the Donbass region, which is essentially an area of Ukraine under rebellion that has been largely under the control of rebels who are friendly with the Russians. And of course, the south, not far away from Mariupol itself, is where you have the Crimean Peninsula, which in 2014, Russia annexed to itself, which is what started the first round of sanctions against Russia. What's more is in the south, Ukraine has a very impressive series of ports, including Mariupol, and the largest of which is Odessa. And the Russians would love nothing more than to basically take away Ukraine's access to the Black Sea, making Ukraine landlocked, as well as taking away the eastern parts of the country, which are where a lot of the country's natural resource wealth are located. Now, Putin's plan has relied upon the idea that he could move all his forces for this big offensive. The truth is, the Ukrainians have been so effective at destroying his forces that he has really relatively little in reserve. So his only chance was to essentially mass them all together in one area. This is especially critical because in the areas where the war has been raging between the Ukrainian government forces and the rebel forces in the Donbass region, the Ukrainians are actually dug in pretty well with forts and trenches reminiscent of World War I. Under any circumstances, that would be difficult to take. So essentially what the Russians, in theory, are looking to do is create a pincer movement, where forces would kind of swing back behind the Donbass trenches, surrounding and cutting off the Ukrainian forces that are located there. To do that, essentially, you'd have forces coming down from the north and forces coming up from the south, meeting in the middle. This is actually the strategy that ultimately the Soviet Union used to defeat the Nazis at Stalingrad. The problem is this: with Ukrainians holding out at Mariupol, though, the forces from the south can't leave there. This has truly been one of the great frustrations of Putin. In fact, predictions of Mariupol falling have been stated repeatedly for at least 2 weeks. Every day I hear, any time now Mariupol is going to fall, and yet it never falls. So with such impressive fighters located there, the Russians can't afford to turn their backs on them. They can't concentrate these forces back into the pincer movement to try to surround the Ukrainian forces in the east. I mean, Putin and his generals are well aware of the fact that such aggressive fighters holed up in Mariupol would cause serious trouble for the Russians' rear guard if they decided that they were not going to continue an actual siege. So a good portion of Putin's force is going to be tied up simply trying to stop these Ukrainians from getting in the way of the rest of their invasion. I think it's fair to say that this announcement that they have succeeded in Mariupol is a misstatement. More likely, it appears that this is another loss for the Russians. Another loss, like their loss in the invasion of Kyiv and their loss of the battleship Moskva. No, it appears that the bad news keeps coming from Vladimir Putin, and the Ukrainians and their American and European supporters seem to feel no pressure to back down at this point. Well, if you want to hear about the lies that Putin has been telling his people about this war, why don't you check out this video over here I did a while ago. I'll see you then. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.